so it's a timetable that he uses instead of the kind of, because there's really hardly any freight at all.
Oh, so his layout is more emphasizing passenger rather than freight.
Yeah, he has a pretty good size investment in passenger trains, and so that's what he wants to run. And kind of like, I'm thinking like, well, what's the fun in that, but but no, that's what he's going to do, and it will be fun. So.
Well, does he do any sort of car swapping, like coming into the station, taking REA cars off, or?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically, but the little bit I know about what he's planning on doing, it's probably going to be pretty much just one passenger train after another. And because of the locations he's modeling, there's not a lot of interchange. Like there's nothing like Kansas City where the chief, hooks up to some new cars, or like where is it, Salt Lake City, that they would trains would split, or up there in Washington State.
Yeah, like the Empire Builder, part of it goes one way and part of it splits.
Yeah. It takes a big layout to do that kind of thing, for sure.
Yeah,
to make it work. So yeah, he is going to be doing passenger trains, and I look forward to when he gets that figured out and we can start doing that.
Yeah, I think sometimes passenger trains tend to be looked at as more of an eye candy feature, but there's actually a lot of operations that can be done with them. And Chuck Hitchcock was kind of one of the preeminent guys in years past on passenger intensive operations. So just curious to hear what others have done in that regard, but appreciate that, what you shared, Tom.
Well, and the very first layout I ever operated on was Chuck Hitchcock's layout, and it was just like, I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was just like in love with the layout, for sure. If anybody's ever seen it or seen pictures of it in the magazines, but yeah.
So there's like I said, one of the ideas I had even for mine, I mean, I'm just running an Amtrak, which actually has the long distance chargers applied to it before Amtrak even got there. So I'm happy to say that. But one of the ideas was when it comes in through essentially what's representing Minneapolis, to take, I'm still running the express box cars that they got rid of, to essentially take those off and put a baggage car on instead. So you get a little bit of switching with a passenger train. Sure. What Tom was saying about the timetable, there's an outdoor layout up in, or one of the large scale ones, the 1/8 scale up in Michigan, the Michigan Central, and they actually have a passenger train that runs to the timetable, and everybody else knows what time it is, and they actually essentially have to get off the main to let that passenger train run through. So that's you kind of have to watch your clock and actually pay attention to that train coming through. But
I might chime in with what I'm planning, and that is the B&O in Baltimore in 1952, and that gives me the opportunity to run commuter and through trains. And the B&O in Baltimore had B&O basically had a Washington to Jersey City business and a long distance business where trains would come through Washington. And basically there were two railroads. They would turn on the Y back into the station, change the consist almost completely, and then head on west, or vice versa, head on east. The commuters would run Baltimore to Washington and Washington to Martinsburg, which was not the heavily traveled portion of it. But some of the commuter trains, for example, would take a baggage mail car, which would be added to the train at Washington. It would leave Washington. When it got to Baltimore, the baggage mail car would be taken off and added to the Washington to Philadelphia train. So there's some operation there. There's also at Washington, the Washington Terminal Company charged the B&O, the Pennsy, the Southern, and anybody else that came through there for maintenance on their cars. So the B&O would take passenger cars and deadhead them on commuter trains to Baltimore, because in Baltimore, you had a passenger maintenance facility. Not the rebuild facility, but a maintenance facility. So they deadhead east and then deadhead west. So you had that type of operation in the commuter trains. The through trains, the west to Jersey City trains would occasionally have some work at Baltimore, and certainly at Washington, there'd be almost complete consist changes. There would be some, for example, the St. Louis train would pick up a Pullman at Baltimore and on its way east and drop off that Pullman on its way west. There were also some west trains that came into Baltimore and terminated. So you had the overnight train to Cleveland and the daylight train to Cleveland that ran from Cleveland to Washington, changed consist slightly, and then terminated in Baltimore. So you had facilities in Baltimore that had to handle and maintain commuter service as well as long distance service. And the long distance service meant that, for example, on the dining cars or any food service car, the train would be broken up in Baltimore. The Pullmans and coaches would go to the coach yard. The food service cars would go to the commissary track where they'd be restocked. When the train was made up to depart, the Pullmans would be placed, then the food service cars would be placed about 2 hours before departure. And then the coaches and head end equipment would be added to the train. You also had a premier train from Baltimore to Detroit. And that started in Baltimore, obviously went to Detroit, came back. The interesting thing there is that's a train that in Washington headed in because it was pulled rear end first from Washington to Baltimore so that it didn't have to be turned on the Y at Baltimore. So I think that there's enough passenger activity to make it kind of interesting. And on top of that, in Baltimore, the engine service facility was about 2 miles from the Y at Baltimore to Riverside. So any trains that terminated in Baltimore, the engines would run to the engine facility, and then vice versa would run from the engine facility to Camden Station to pick up their train. Some of the commuters would even be pulled up through the Howard Street Tunnel to Mount Royal, where in the morning they would depart from Mount Royal instead of from Camden Station, stop at Camden Station, and then head on down to Washington. So I think there's enough activity passenger-wise there to keep quite a few people entertained. And that's certainly Washington today.
Yeah, I used to live out there. I mean, this is here's the Amtrak facility over here to the right. But what I was noticing, I was going to see if you actually knew, and there was a Y right here. You can kind of see it.
Well, actually, there are two Ys. The Y that crosses, Eric, if you hold on there and move your cursor down and now up, you just passed it.
But yeah, there's the one here.
Yeah, that was the passenger facility that was owned by the Washington Terminal Company.
Okay.
The sweeping curve just above that is the B&O main line.
This guy here.
Nope. Yes, that one. That's the B&O main line that came from Baltimore to the right and went to west up toward the top of your screen.
Yeah.
And that was part of the why that was used to back trains into Union Station, which would be in the southwest corner
Right.
of the video.
Right. Yeah. Union Station is down here. This building here, that was the REA building. So I worked there on a project. Yeah, obviously it's been rebuilt, but yeah, I was just curious if you happen to know, do they still, I would think that they're still Ying some of the long distance trains that originate in Washington, so that people are going forward, right?
Yeah, I don't know for sure if they're still doing that or they're flipping the seats or doing whatever they need to.
Yeah. Like the commuter trains, I think they can flip the seats, because I mean these are all Mark trains here.
Or
So,
Virginia Railway Express.
yeah, or VRE, right? So yeah, I think those kind of go back and forth, because I mean they've got push-pull operation, but I was wondering about the long distance. But yeah, I mean those are just some, I mean this is certainly one of the bigger, it's one of the easiest large Union stations to be able to see. I mean there's obviously New York is probably bigger, but a lot of the track work is completely invisible because it's all underground. So this is you want your something to shoot for. There's your passenger facility and your engine terminal and all that to build. Just need another basement to put it in.
Eric, another layout that has mainly passenger operations is Alan Bell in Indianapolis.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He models the New York Central and Albany area back in the steam days, and
he used to live up in Fort Wayne, I think. I operated on his layout.
Fort Wayne. Okay, sorry, Fort Wayne. It's been quite a few years since I operated down there on one of those weekends, but yeah, he's done multiple staging yards from New York City, from Boston, from the west, from the north, plus some commuter trains that come in from branch lines. And
yeah,
I think
actually, I've got, these are old, but his layout, and again, this is from 15 years ago. So his layout was very, I guess the best way I could describe is very European model, right? If you go to a European layout, a lot of their or a British layout, a lot of their operations are focused on the stations, right? Because they're doing lots and lots of passenger as opposed to freight. He was really doing kind of the same thing. The idea is trains would, like this was the, well, shoot, quadruple deck, maybe triple or quadruple deck staging. Like I said, these are from 2007 so this is one of the stations. I don't have any notes. I apologize for that. But the idea was that the trains would come on, he would do stuff at the stations, and then they would leave. There was really no main line. There was no, it was pretty much just come out of staging, do something in the station, and go back to staging.
yeah, I think
Go up a deck and come in. So it was a very, this was, obviously there's a big engine facility there. You can kind of see, big turntable.
I think the freight yard was off to the left there. And off to the left,
Yeah,
out of the picture was a big peninsula, which was Albany's passenger area.
Yeah. So his was, well, there you go. There's one of the most gorgeous turntables I've ever seen. I think he milled that. But the idea was, okay, how much fuel each one needed. Kind of see that card.
He milled that turntable, and he milled a lot of the
Yeah,
a lot of stuff. He's a great machinist.
yeah. He hasn't operated in a really long time, at least not been involved in with the, well, there you go. There's another shot. So we have all station operations, and it was a very unique, compared to like the European layouts where it's lots of trains running around and round, and it's all based on getting the trains into the station and out of the station on time. This was a very unique compared to the, okay, we're going to run from Los Angeles to New York with every yard in between. This is a really long mainline run with lots of switching. It was a very different experience. It was really good. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I'd like to do that again.
I think even the freight trains rode that way. I don't remember that there was much industry to switch.
No, there really wasn't. It was pretty much just trains came in, you were reassembling them to go back out somewhere else, and that was it. I remember the comment, this was a New York Central, Tom. I don't know specifically what it was called. I just have it as New York Central Allen Bell. Well, hold on. Let me see if I can see on this. Yeah, here we go. Might even be able to see this. Let me reshare this. I don't know if that's clear enough to see or not, but his trains were like there's like a mail train, Wolverine, and they were basically going into New York Central or New York City, I suppose, Troy, Rensselaer Yard, Union Station, or those are the Froms, never mind. Yeah, he basically had Rensselaer Yard, Union Station, and West Albany. Those were his 3 locations.
That's my hometown area. Did he have any milk car service?
Any mail?
Milk cars. There used to be a lot of that in the 30s.
Oh, I don't know. Let me see what I've got in terms of pictures here. So it looks like a lot of, at least from the pictures of the yard, just a lot of boxcars. I think this was probably what, maybe 50s era.
Yeah, it might be
Mostly steam.
Yeah. I mean, there's some diesels here, but
Okay.
yeah, so you're probably talking what, 40s, 50s, because your transition era here. You do have RDC, so maybe it was even as far as the 60s. So I think that's what.
Well, he must have spread because steam was out of the east by 54, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about anybody know when RDCs were made available?
That's a tough one.
I think the first one actually was 49.
Okay, so yeah, we're talking, I think we kind of, late 40s, early 50s at the, more than likely, so.
There's a question on the chat, and yes, that is the same Alan Bell. And there's a link to his layout on the chat. The Albany division or something like that.
Yep, yeah, that's him.
Another interesting feature he had were the towers that controlled major junctions. And there was a little diagram, and it said if you want to go from point A to point B, you line switches 2 and 3. If you want to go from point A to point C, it's switches 2 and 4. So that anybody going in there to switch or through the tower area knew exactly which turnouts they had to set to do the route they wanted.
Yeah, so for John's benefit, that link there that it was in the October 2008 DO that that division has a copy of, but it's also in our library. There's a good copy of the operations, like the trains moving back and forth too. So
Information Bud Company made the first RDC in 1949.
okay, so yeah, that's our, well, and actually this article here is basically saying 1950 that was what he was modeling. So,
Yeah, they made 398 of them in Philadelphia.
all righty. So yeah, he is modeling New York Central and Albany in 1950, according to this article here. So,
Oh, I got to see that layout.
So a couple more plugs, Eric.
yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
This is kind of old, but if you join the OPSIG, you have access to all the old DOs, and I'm not sure we've got it back that far. But there was an article in the July and October 1998 DOs.
We actually have all of the DOs.
Okay, so there was a passenger train operations article, part 1 in July of 1998 and part 2 in October of 1998. And if I'm not mistaken, isn't there a chapter on passenger operations in the compendium?
I believe so.
I think so. So
Yeah,
just-
Bruce, actually, there is. I've got a copy of the ops group compendium, and yes, there's a whole discussion and all that on it.
Yeah. I also believe that Andy Sperandio wrote a couple of his operator columns on passenger operations. Andy was big on passenger operations, although he never really got his layout up and running. But that's another place to look if you've got back issues of Model Railroader.
Yeah, so July, as you said, July 1998, we do have a low res copy of that. And October 98 as well.
Okay.
Article by Bruce Ryan. So,
Yep. So all you have to do is be a member of the OPSIG and you can access those.
Great. Thanks, Bruce.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
I operate on Alan Keller's Bluff City Southern, and he's up in northern Tennessee, and he is heavy on the passenger operations. And if you wind up being the station master, you wind up with a list of all the trains that are coming in, and they've got to be broken up and put back together again. He's got a coach yard, and of course he's got the REA location and baggage cars and all that. And if you don't get the cars in the exact spot in the train, that train is not going to run well on his layout. And he has, all these stations. He goes to Chattanooga, Nashville, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And it's about 50-50 freight and passenger. Some beautiful passenger trains on his layout.
Roy, what model railroader is that?
Alan Keller.
Oh, okay. The one that does the videos.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been operating on his layout since 2013. He has monthly operating sessions.
Where did you say his layout is?
He's in Talbot, Tennessee.
Okay, I've got some relatives in Tennessee, so maybe I'll have to look them up.
He's about 30 miles north of Knoxville.
Okay, great.
And it's a beautiful layout. It's been written up in Model Railroader, and he used to work for Model Railroader.
Right.
So it's 100% scenic, and you talk to him about the new stuff that's coming out, and he prefers the old stuff that he's got. He doesn't buy anything new.
So is he up there by Rocky Top?
Pretty close.
Okay.
He's close to Sevierville, Gatlinburg.
Yep.
North of that. From my house, it's 150 miles. So.
But in Tennessee, going 150 miles is like going 300 miles anywhere else. Go around and up and over mountains.
No. We have interstates down here.
I know. I go down there a lot. I'm just kidding.
But his layout it's a beautiful layout. Some of the best scenery I've seen.
So the picture I've got up here is from Dr. Michael Borkon's UP layout in Kansas City. He had a fair number of, actually it looks like this was a male like a mail express train sitting in this station. But I think I've got some other, that was quite the yard, but and I guess I didn't get a lot of the passenger train pictures, but trying to see if there are any others that I've got.
Did you say he's Kansas City?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
He literally lives on the state line.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, like his house is on Kansas. Across the street is
Missouri.
Missouri. So
Yeah. It's a gorgeous layout.
yeah,
He added on to his house so he could add on to the layout.
yeah.
That's a commitment.
Let me see.
I've got a quick question while you're looking, Eric. Has any, and it's nothing to do with passenger trains, but it has to do with the JMRI fast clock. Has anybody worked out a workaround that you could put non-integer instead of 2 to 1, 3 to 1? I had to redo my whole timetable because it was just a little bit off, and I ended up changing all the times when it would have been nicer to just make it like, 1.7 to 1 instead of 2 to 1.
Have you tried asking in the, about the JMRI groups.io list?
Yeah, and most of that, they tell me it can be done. People are working on it and they have heard of it, but nobody so far has really nailed it down.
Okay.
I just thought I'd ask the group think here to see if anybody's heard of any workarounds while I was here. Apparently not. I hear nothing but crickets. We'll go back to passengers.
Yeah. Here's another picture. This is Jim Rollwaggy from Cincinnati. He had, or I think he's up closer to Dayton. His railroad's called the Denver Pacific, and he had a fair number of, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 or 7 passenger, maybe 6 passenger trains in his yard here. These aren't great pictures. These are from 2015, but he ran a fair number, but I don't think there was a lot of work to them. Well, that's a bad picture. I'm gonna get rid of that. Now, one of the things I've got on planning to do on mine is I have the I don't know if anybody's from Minnesota, the North Star passenger service that runs out of Minneapolis. Athern had the double deck Bombardier cars and F-59s to pull those, so it makes for a nice train. I can almost do push pull, but it gets a little funny. Those cars don't. Toy cars don't run as well backwards as real ones do. So,
Eric, I have a question.
go ahead.
So when you build these passenger terminals, what do you end up with, like dozens of electromagnetic uncouplers to get these trains pulled apart and put back together?
You certainly could. I think a lot of people will do, and everybody feel free to jump in here. I think a lot of people just use picks to uncouple. Hold on a second.
I don't know if you can see this. Barbecue skewers,
Yeah.
Right.
100 for $1.
But what do you do when you have diaphragms?
You don't go in between the coupler itself. You actually grab the air hose. And if there's enough slack, you can actually pull the air hose away.
Okay.
What you just described is absolutely the best way to separate cars, even freight cars. If you work with the glad hand or the little loop at the bottom and push them together with your fingers, and then use the pick from the side, it works so much better.
One thing I do, Tom, is besides these is I'll take a pencil and make it very narrow. And that I will put in between the couplers every now and then. And that's actually adding a little graphite to the coupler. And it helps lubricate the couplers a little bit. Because you can't always just grab that glad hand.
Yeah, and I have shelf couplers on my tank cars. The beautiful thing about them is like, if you have a derailment, they'll never come apart. But you really cannot come in from the top with those at all to uncouple them.
So the only bad thing about those, if you do have a derailment, like I've got above me, it's 6'5" to the floor. And if one comes off, they all come off. Ask me how I know.
So
Another trick.
Tom, your method of grabbing the glad hands is not actually the method that Katie designed into the coupler. When they use their magnets, they just pull those glad hands aside.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's real easy. If you've got a little pick, just go in there and grab the glad hand and pull it out. They look ugly, but it works.
It really works.
And you don't, it's really difficult to pop those little springs out when you're using the glad hand, but you can pop knuckle springs out real easily if you're shooting down between the cars and trying to grab the knuckles and you miss, then the spring goes somewhere and then the whole coupler is kind of not working well.
Another trick that people use is putting a piece of wire into the skewer, or maybe something a little bigger than a skewer, and putting a Z-bend in the end of it to make it easier to grab the glad hand. And another thing that I've seen people use is the Rapido automatic, or I'm not sure exactly what they call it, the Rail Crew electromagnetic uncoupler with the little blue dot, blue LED that shows you where the center of the coupler is, or center of the uncoupling magnet is.
There was let's see if I have a picture of it. Up on Jeff Otto's layout, that amazing ore hauling layout, he has these, well, the best way I can describe it is essentially they're magnets on a stick, where you can essentially push the magnet into an area and have it.
Dale's showing one right now. It's a Rick's uncoupler.
Hold on, let me stop sharing. I'm not sharing. Who has it? Or
I
somebody
do.
show?
Here you go.
Dale.
I've got it.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
the Rick's couplers.
Yeah, those work well. This, what I'm talking about, was actually under, it was something he built into the layout. So it was kind of like, and I don't unfortunately have a picture of what it looked like underneath. But essentially you could push the stick in and it would put the magnet under the track, so that you could basically do the, back up and pull forward type approach. I unfortunately don't have any pictures of that mechanism.
At our old club location, we used magnets under the track. And what we found was, as long as you had the cars under tension, they wouldn't uncouple.
Yeah.
So you mark the location of the magnet, you pull up, you stop, you unload the tension on it, and they'd automatically uncouple and you just pull away. But as long as you had them tensioned where you were actually pulling, they wouldn't do that. You just have to get used to it. I work on, let's see, Steve Davis's Kansas City Southern uses that in his yards.
Okay.
And they work pretty good. You just got to get used to them.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing to remember, let me these are some pictures I've gathered over the years and kept for the homegrown system. The thing to remember, like this is from John Parker's. He's got Union Station kind of tucked in a corner with Amtrak switch engines to basically pull cars in and out. I believe he's swapping in and out like express freight cars and so on. This photo here is, I don't know whose this is, but the thing to remember is that at least with working some of these trains, I mean, there's no reason like where this, that thumbtack is, there's no reason you couldn't put an uncoupling ramp right there, one of the magnets. And then you could basically pull the engine, you know, train pulls, well, I guess this train's ready to go, but you know, if this one went head in, you could basically have a magnet down at the other end. And in this case, it'd be tricky because it'd be under the train shed. But trying to see if there's some other examples. That's a bad picture.
One thing I've done on mine, Eric, is I've got little yellow pieces of brass pipe, about 16th inch, and I stick them in the center of where the magnet is, a hidden magnet, and it looks like yard air.
Okay.
And that's on all my yard tracks. That way the operator knows exactly where the center of that is. It doesn't look too obtrusive. A buddy of mine used to use blue barrels.
Okay.
Just anything to mark.
I think this picture is Andy Keeney's, if I'm not mistaken. Up in Lansing. He's got a fairly big passenger operation. But yeah, as far as the uncouplers, I don't know. I think his was pretty much, he's got either end and then he's got like run through. So this is another picture of John Parker's. He's got this was a screen grab from a video. I just wanted to grab the Union Station there. But yeah, I think the picks, if you can get the magnets into a good location where, as I don't know if John said or who said about, as long as the train's under tension, you're not going to have to worry about it uncoupling. But yeah, the rail crew, Rapido. Yeah, the on-off remote uncoupler. Oops. Sorry. Yep, they've got a new.
Rapido's down.
Now they just got a new website. There we go. And there's no photo. So for 20 bucks, 21 bucks, they'll do a remote. Let's see if we can find a picture here. Okay, well. So there's probably some videos and so on how to use it.
One thing that I've done is put the magnet on the end of a servo, and the servo will move in and out.
Yeah, that was basic. Yeah, that was the gist of the thing that Jeff had hit on his railroad. There were basically dowels with magnets on them, and you could slide them forward, and it would be underneath where the cars were, and you can pull them back out to not engage the magnet. So same concept. Servo would be easier. His were just manual, but same concept.
Thanks, guys, for all the input.
All righty. So who else has a question? About 10 minutes left.
I have a question about stuff for myself. My layout is a point to point, but I have a friend that has a layout that is a loop that is I'm gonna take my background off here so I can hold something up to show it. So they have a town A, a town B, and a town C. And he's interested in doing operations, but the question is, you don't really come from staging to another, go to another staging. Does anyone have any experience in knowing how to design this kind of a layout into an operations scenario?
I was gonna say, Dale, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was gonna
Hey.
ask, Tom, is that gonna be a loop or is that just gonna be a point to point in a big circle?
Well, right now, what it is, it's one loop that kind of goes around and goes over the top of the other loop.
Okay, so C, if you go to the right from C, the way I'm looking at it, you're actually crossing the other line there that goes to from town A to town C. Is that correct?
There you go.
I'm just gonna spotlight you, Tom, so we have
Okay.
the track plan up.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
don't know how to explain it. It's just like it goes I think probably he considers town C to be the center of his layout. And then town A you go to one direction, you get to A, one direction, you get to B, but before you know it, you're back in C again, so.
well, our club layout is a loop. We use that for rail fanning. We also have a peninsula that goes down the middle of it that has industries on it because we operate it. Now, when we operate, we don't use the complete loop. We actually, if you look at it, you're going around in a circle. And then what would be on the right side is where the peninsula is. So we don't utilize that part of the loop when we operate. We either go from yard A to yard B, and then there's things in between. And then if we have to, we run a train the opposite direction into our peninsula. So, and I think if I remember right, Gateway has some operating information that they use loops to actually operate. And part of the time you're not using the complete loop. That could be a staging area. If he wanted to, he could, like I say, park trains on it to bring him into his towns. But yeah, he could operate that layout real easily.
Yeah, my feeling is to everything goes from town C, either east to town B or west to town A, and then back again as a way of managing that.
Yeah, exactly.
The other way you could,
all one direction.
Yeah, the other way you could do it, I'm gonna remove the spotlight temporarily. So that track there by town C, I'm assuming that continues underneath the track.
Yes.
Okay. So back when I was at Purdue, back a long time ago, the Purdue layout was basically just a big loop. But what we would do is so for instance, in his case, it's going from town A to B to C or A to C. There's no reason that you have to go directly from A to C. What we did is we basically would do, okay, the first time around, the block numbers meant these towns. The second time around, it meant something different. And so you kind of extended your run by saying, okay, well, one trip was 3 loops around the railroad. Because again, it was set up as a big loop. There were some sidings along the way, but for the most part, it was just the big. Now they've rebuilt it many times since I was there, but that way you could basically say, okay, you're leaving A, but you got to make a circuit before you stop at B. Or as Dale was saying, there's no reason you couldn't put a siding in there to basically say, okay, well, that temporarily that becomes your staging, right? It could be as simple as, one track. But then if you used like Dan's or, you know, the car card system over at Dan's with the car order, that might make it easier. I mean, you could probably do anything, but the idea is that, okay, they need to make a couple of laps before they go to the destination. You know, it kind of breaks the whole idea of, okay, well, I'm going through the same scene more than once, but, you know, you have to work with what space you've got. So that's just another idea.
How
Yeah,
large
Robert-
is that layout?
What's that?
How large is it? How big is this circle? Are these circles? I mean, if it's 60 feet around, you don't really need to.
Well, yeah.
Well, it's O scale, which then all of a sudden makes everything closer together again too. It's large. It's a large layout.
Well, John Armstrong's book, Track Planning for Realistic Operation, discusses this.
Oh, okay. I've got that.
And he basically says, you know, if you're a railroad, like what Eric was saying, just call it different towns. And he had one idea where you call it different towns as you go around, and there would be different industries in the different towns. So that might be integrated.
So you only service the grain mill on your second lap,
right?
And the coal mine on the first one, or something like that.
Bob Perkins out of Iowa does that. He'll actually circle, you come out of your town, you go around the layout so many times, and then, you know, and like you said, you're running through the same territory, but, you know, who cares if you've got a nice layout. So let's see here. There's some good videos on operations on the NMRA website. And I imagine most of us on here are NMRA members. When you get into the videos, the clinics that they put on in previous years, there's some good operations videos in there. And one of them, the guy out of, I want to say he's out of Alabama, possibly. He did one on a 4x8 layout that was basically a loop. They set it up and he talked about how to operate it. So it's very interesting. So you can operate a 4x8 loop. Just, you know, use your imagination. You don't have to go all the way around it, or you can go circle around it several times. But, you know, you can do a lot of things on any kind of layout if you really want to operate it.
I mean, it does help to have at least a few sidings to park cars. If some of the Facebook groups, people will put, okay, I have a loop. How do I operate? Well, okay, well, you need to put a siding in here or something. You got to, you know, once you get tired of roundy round, you got to have somewhere for those cars to go, because that's like one of the first things is like, okay, well, what's your, you know, the common, I have a great big yard and then two loops that connect the end of, you know, the two ends of the yard. I'm like, okay, so you're going to run your trains round and round. What do those cars do? Where do they go? And so that's sort of the, you know, that's one of the first things. And even on a 4x8 layout, you can still do that.
I was going to say something I've seen done is people use 1 yard on a continuous layout as 2 different locations. So you start at A, you go to B, you go to C, and you end up in A again, but A is now D. And then that becomes the other point. The train is turned there and goes back around, and it, you know, starts and ends in the same place. But again, you might even designate that these 2 tracks are in A, these 2 tracks are in B.
Or the trick I've seen, and I don't remember where I saw it, is basically the train comes in on one main and crosses over into the other one, essentially as it's running through. So basically your right-hand running train suddenly switch to the other track as it comes out the other side, and then it can, you know, or as you said, the double-ended yard. I've seen that multiple times.
If it's steam, you need a turntable. If you want to stop at the yard, turn around and go back the other way.
True.
You need some way to turn the engine a Y. But other than that, I'm sure that's been used many times with a yard and a high line and multiple loops around. That
How
was
many of
my
you
idea
guys,
that I wanted to do also.
how many of you guys running steam actually run the train backwards? I mean, coal car first.
I've got a couple cab forwards, so I don't know how to answer that.
They always run backwards.
We have a situation on our club layout where we have to run backwards to get from point A back to a turntable so we can turn it. So yeah, we run it both directions as necessary.
Yeah, it was a common practice for short runs.
Right.
Here in Indianapolis, our transportation museum, that's gone now, but they had a steam engine, and they literally would run the engine around to the other end of the train, and one direction was always tender first.
Yeah.
And it always kind of like, how do you see? And the question is, when you have a big steam engine, how do you see what you're doing anyway?
Well, it also helped that there was only ever one train on any of the tracks.
Yeah, there's only one. Yeah, but you still had to be blowing the whistle for grade crossings and dodging cars.
Yeah.
So one
Steam.
one method that Southern Pacific used to run backwards, and there were a couple of branch passenger operations that ran backwards for quite a distance, is they'd run them forward and then they'd run around the train and run tender forward, and the tender would have a big headlight on it and a pilot, and they just run it backwards for that distance.
Oh.
They were usually clear vision tenders so they could see over the top of them, but that's how they did it.
Yeah, this tender had a very large headlight on it when they were running tender first, but it was still lean out the cab when you're going that way.
The Pennsy had consolidations with cow catcher on the tender.
Well,
Steam
That's
operations. Anybody running steam make required water tank stops? I've been on steam railroads where there isn't even a water tank on the damn entire railroad. And I got a small railroad, but you got to stop and take water. And I got a sound module and the tank's animated, but
Unless you're the New York Central.
Well, yeah, but I mean, is anybody even modeling that, the trench?
Jim Ferentz has a circuit in his engines that if you don't stop for water, it'll drop the fire and stop the engine.
Yeah, well.
That's cool.
One railroad where I operate has a timer, and you have to stop at the tank and set the timer, and you can't proceed until the timer winds down. Wow, interesting.
Yeah, we got a sound module, they spot the tender and then hit the water sound, and it's about 55 seconds. When it gets through playing its loop of the water fill, then you can go on. Yeah.
I think Ted Schnepp has that on that massive O-gauge Milwaukee Railroad. I think he's got one of the water towers that will drop the spout, and the same thing as that you're just describing there, Bill.
Yeah. Just a thought while we're talking about steam.
I'm running diesel primarily. I've got a couple steam engines, but the diesels were, try to see the man who's from California there. I'm basically running the Siskiyou line, and I have my diesels at least slow up for an inspection at the water towers. That way I can still keep the water towers in use, because there are 7 water towers on the layout, only 2 steam engines.
Yeah, I have a Canadian Pacific Royal Hudson, but that one, there's an invisible truck that pulls up and fills it up with water. Just anytime it stops, it just gets taken care of.
Come on, Eric, buy a water truck. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Support the hobby,
Make sure
Eric.
you got a fire hydrant nearby, because that's usually what they hook up to.
With the Canadian operators, you mentioned water tower, they're looking for a beer. So guys,
And
first thing I
those
do when I
water
come
towers
to
should
a
be
layout-
enclosed.
Sorry.
I ran into something interesting this week, actually, in a conversation I was having with a friend of mine. I model modern era, obviously. It looks like we're running out of time here.
Yeah, just go ahead and finish up.
Okay. With modern era, of course, my layout is an industrial, it's a port. And we receive a lot of grain cars. And I got to looking at dates printed on my grain cars, and most of them are coming up on 50 years old. So I can either buy all new grain cars, or I'm going to have to pick an era. And I picked an era because I don't want to spend all that money. I've got well over 100 grain cars. I don't think I want to replace them. So now we are modeling 2010 to 2018. Because in 18 was when all of them had to have strikes. And basically, most of my cars will drop dead in 2018. They'll be, if you read the build dates on them, they're 50 years old.
Yeah. I have the same problem when I got, finally got my layout put together and had enough places to get the cars out. It's like, Western Pacific boxcar. Yeah, they don't exist anymore. All of the reporting marks are completely jacked up now. So I need to go in and patch them to say, okay, all of these railroads don't exist anymore. These boxcars I bought when I was a student at Purdue, nope, that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. But
yeah, the rust buckets I get to paint up though. See, I could enjoy it. So I patched one the other night.
Yeah, we have kind of a blurry era. It's like, well, it's modern. I've got the engines that Amtrak just got, and I've got some that, well, they got rid of, but it's my railroad. Don't like it, go find somebody else.
There you go.
All right. Well, we appreciate everybody showing up. Like I said, we went a little bit over, but I think we had a good discussion anyway.
Is there a link to that passenger themed layout in Kentucky someone mentioned?
I don't know.
Alan Keller's.
I guess I thought I wrote down Albert Taylor, but Alan Keller.
Yeah, Alan Keller, like the Alan Keller Productions. I'm sure he's got a video of his railroad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's in Tennessee.
In Tennessee.
Tennessee, Kentucky.
somewhere south of here.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in northern Tennessee.
Gotcha. All right.
All right. Well, as always, appreciate everybody showing up. If you want to present in the future, just let me know. We're looking for, assuming people keep showing up, May and June would be the next couple of months open. We're also looking for articles for the July DO. If you have something you'd like to write about, please get in touch with me. Deadline for that article would basically be about the beginning of April. So you got a month and a half to put something together. And if not, you can always, basically every 3 months is the deadline. So with that said, like I said, thanks for everybody who showed up. And the next event will be on the third Sunday of March, which I believe is the 20th. Hold on.
Same day.
Yeah, March 20th. So hopefully we see everybody and get a few more people next time. So thanks again for coming.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for the.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Good night.